Now, if it feels like we're slightly over-governed in this country with 3 levels of government, you'd be right. And sadly, we have learned about the powers of the state governments. Well, the states now are trying to act as a faux federal government, with news today that the former Environment Minister, now Treasurer of New South Wales, Matt Keane, would like all of the states to get together and literally have unified policies when it comes to climate change. Now, remember, this bloke is in charge of the money, not the environment, but is this one of the deals that had to be done for him to not step up to be the Deputy Liberal leader, to make sure that Perrottet could become Premier? Well, wait, watch and see. But the idea of states trying to unify to be a shadow federal government is something worth talking about, with Gideon Rozner from the IPA and Labor Bootstraps running for the mayoralty of Sydney, Linda Scott. Gideon, I'll start with you. Collaboration between the states, that's fine. We have things like National Cabinet. We have ministerial level meetings about education and everything else. But the reality is all the states are on the same page. They've all got more aggressive environmental targets than the federal government. They're all in charge of the regulation of things like the power network. It's always, sort of, to my view, a bit of a folly of federal politics that we talk about electricity prices when it's actually either state-owned or privatised instrumentalities at the state level. But what does it say to you when there is someone like Matt Keane saying that effectively that the states should form sort of a shadow federal government because they disagree with where his own party is as the federal government?
Well, you're right, Paul. Look, I'm all for competitive federalism, but this is collusive federalism. But then, to be fair, I can't see that climate action or emissions reduction it falls to the federal government or the state government one way or the other. To be honest, it's all equally asinine. Now, Australia is responsible for 1.13% of global emissions. The share of emissions that can be attributed to New South Wales and South Australia and the ACT, who have signed up to this sort of agreement, is a fraction of that. And the climate action contemplated would reduce that by a sliver. We are talking about the head of a pinpoint here. This will make absolutely no difference to the Earth's climate. It is just a feel-good exercise for the Matt Keanes and Stephen Marshalls of the world. And the fact that any Liberal government would have anything to do with it, I find very, very sad, because ultimately the cost of all this green chicanery will be borne by you and I through our taxes and through our power bills, so a select few can get rich off our tax dollars. It's very, very sick.
While, as Oxfam pointed out last week, the richest 1% produce 16% of global emissions, also over the next little while. So again, the rich people living in pink houses in the Sydney Harbour and sort of, pulling all of the puppet strings as they do, trying to win over people like Keane. I mean, they can pay for it, but everyone else, cost of transition matters. Look, again, collaborative things, Linda, I have no problem with. I have no problem if all the local councils want to band it together to try to have strength in numbers. I understand that. But there's something about the state government level trying to pull together to try to end up being some sort of shadow federal government on a matter of policy does concern me.
Well, look, it won't surprise you, Paul, to know that I'm on the very opposite end of the spectrum to Gideon here. Of course, local governments, as you know, are not represented on the National Cabinet. And so actually forums like this are really important for us to engage on all issues, be they climate change or affordable housing or all the other things that local governments are working on. I've spoken with Matt Keane about this today, and we're really excited about perhaps working more with a forum to hold talks for sub-national governments. We've got 537 great councils across Australia. When you add up all the emissions reduction targets of our Australian local governments, they get you to 96% of the current government's emissions reduction target. So the point is local governments are doing an enormous amount differently in different areas, of course, because we're there to represent the different needs and expectations of our communities. But the reality is, without some federal leadership, without a legislated target, it's very difficult for councils to move forward. So groups like this with sub-national discussions between all the governments are a really helpful way for local governments to achieve the ambitions of our communities and actually get in to save them money. In the city of Sydney, we popped in LED lighting, saved a bucket load of emissions and saved a bucket load of money. Really practical, simple climate solutions that end up also saving people a lot of money.
Yeah, but hang on. You just threw in there about legislated target. That's party political choice coming up at the next election. This feels like a collaboration which is in search of creating pressure to get a political outcome at the next election, not climate change action over the next 10 years.
Well, look, it's quite new, but my understanding of it is that it's a forum to discuss practical solutions to action on climate change.
Do you think it'll exist in a year's time if Labor's the government?
Of those ideas, and we've done a lot of work to trial on the ground what works and what doesn't, and I think we have a lot of expertise to share. So we'd love to be able to do that with state governments and actually federal governments.
Yeah, I've got a little feeling, Gideon, this is a one and done. Let's all get together. Let's all make it seem like the government's in the wrong place federally, and then we'll all promise to meet next year. But if we get the federal government we want, no one turns up next year.
Because we voted for it so many times. Linda, can I just ask a serious question? Why is it difficult for councils to move forward, so to speak, in the absence of federal action and a federal target? Why can't councils and state governments just unilaterally, cut their power bills or something and reach their own targets? What will a target do, a federal target?
We're doing that, but it's a bit like businesses also calling for certainty. It helps when we're all working towards the one aim. And, that would certainly
but what
make
certainty don't you have?
Councils
Paris is
have
2030 and then net zero 2050.
Sure. Anyway, we'll get on with the work. It would help to have a clear national
The work is the
target,
advocacy, not about climate, but about changing the federal government. That's what Matt Keane's involved in.
But
No. And this is a serious... Sorry, Linda, go on.
How can people disagree, again, with coming together to discuss practical solutions to what is objectively a problem? Now, we now have both sides of federal politics in this nation agreeing that climate change is real, the science is real, we need to have targets and we need to take action. So that is not a party political statement anymore in Australia.
Legislating a target.
To discuss ideas for emissions reduction, to discuss innovative ways, things that work from Alice Springs to my area, the city of Sydney, all over the country. These are good things to do for governments.
I would respectfully disagree. I don't think they make a difference. Well, they don't make a difference to the Earth's climate in any meaningful sense, and they're expensive, and this technology either doesn't work or doesn't exist at all. That's getting away from energy efficiency and LED panels and all that sort of thing. But fundamentally, we're talking about major changes to the way in which our economy works based on a wish and a prayer and a few feel-good pamphlets at Glasgow. I really don't think people grasp the insanity of what we're about to do. We are forcibly driving down production and living standards while blowing money on crap, on technology that just will not work. And we are deindustrializing ourselves while nefarious actors like Russia and China and other countries are refusing to do the same, quite reasonably, I might add. This will end in tears.
Yeah, but Gideon, the targets for 2030 are exactly the same ones that the government had going into the last election. The change is about 30 to 50, no question, right? So when we talk about deindustrialisation and immediate job losses and all the rest of it, that was something that was on the table 3 years ago. Nothing's changed on that front.
Sure, but Paul, you well know that a true visionary would be like Donald Trump, who pulled the United States out of agreements like Paris because he knew that it imposed economic costs on the United States for no real benefit. And guess what? The United States, during that time when Donald Trump was in office, actually reduced its emissions anyway. This is just playing into the hands of our enemies, and as I said, it will impoverish people who can least afford it. And for all the bleating about inequality that we hear in the public debate, the fact that something like this that will enrich a lot of well-heeled insiders with our tax dollars while tanking living standards for people who can't afford it, I just find something very, very, you have the next King of England, the next head of state of Australia going around talking about how he's driving a Jaguar powered with wine and cheese, for God's sake. I mean, there is a huge disconnect between working people and people who stand to benefit from all of this, and somebody has to start calling it out.
Well, and this is the thing, Linda, where, if billionaires wanted to do something for the planet, they'd create shell companies that were sort of worth $1 and all profits sent into the non-profit sector or are paying for charities. Instead, there are people who have made bets that will make billions of dollars off the decisions that are made and will be advocated by groups like the one that we're talking about here tonight. That's true, right?
I don't know, because I don't follow the hedging market. What I follow is the science.
Well, you don't think one day there'll be big wind?
I don't know, but the planet is not going to cope with the level of emissions we're currently at. It's not going to cope, indeed, with the kinds of discussions that all our leaders across the world are having at Glasgow this week. What we need is action to reduce emissions. And again, I've given you one practical example tonight, LED lights. You change the light bulb, you save money, you reduce emissions.
I don't disagree, but here's an idea for local
hundreds
council.
and hundreds of practical examples like this. Popping solar panels on our council buildings where there's sun shining. The payback period for that investment in panels is a very short period of time. We're saving ratepayers money.
Well, what about this? Here's an idea.
Very simple
I'm going to get
equation
solar panels. I'm going to get them to mine Bitcoin with.
Okay, guys, here's the thing, right? Here's the idea that I think for local council, right? Which is if they're fair income about trying to send messages on climate change, revoke all parking privileges of the Chinese embassy or consulate, and send more council rangers down to those places and give extra fines all day, every day until there's action on climate change. Because that's 23% of global emissions. 23%. Yet we talk about what's happening in Australia all day, every day, guys.
Well, I'll tell you this, Paul. If war with China wasn't a certainty before, making the ambassador ride around on a hybrid bicycle instead of driving his chauffeured limousine, I think will be a bit of a slight to our friends in Beijing.
All right, talk to you in a second.
Acquaintances.
Talk to you in a second, guys. Thank you very much.